actually start with Franziska Davies. And Franziska, with your experience, Franziska is a public intellectual and a very famous public figure in Germany because as a historian of Eastern European history, she became very vocal about kind of contextualizing the Russian invasion of Ukraine, providing a lot of historical information on Ukraine, but also on Russia. And Franziska leads her own Substract blog, and she writes about her experience as a historian, but also about different issues. And one of her posts is called Vladimir the Good Russian, where she criticizes kind of the lack of responsibility of the Russian society, and I'll just read a little bit so that you get a sense. So I would like to ask then Franziska to comment on reactions she got from German society, her experience in German academia, talking about critical views on Russian history, critical views on kind of historical responsibility of Russian society and Russian state towards colonialism. But before that, I will simply quote, if that's okay. Yes? So I'm starting. Vladimir Kara-Murza is what those who are critical of present-day Russian society ironically call a good Russian. This term designates Russians who are against the war and against Putin and who often have suffered because of their position. They are loved and admired in the West. They receive prizes and scholarships and travel the world. We find their faces in Western newspapers and magazines and see them shaking hands with high-profile politicians, intellectuals, and business people. They are seen as embodying the other Russia that must still exist somewhere. There is only one problem. The good Russian is also a self-centered, more interested in saving Russia than in supporting Ukraine, and he refuses to accept Russian society's agency and responsibility for what is happening. For them, evil begins and ends with Putin's reign, and once he is out of power, the wonderful Russia of the future can begin. According to the good Russian, this is not Russia's war, but Putin's war, even though hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers are waging a war of aggression and are committing genocide in the occupied territories, and the majority of Russians seem either to accept or support this. The problem is not only that the good Russian refuses to recognize Russia's fundamental problem in the past and present, which is its failures to reckon with Russian colonialism, but that he or she themselves cultivate a colonial mindset. So this is kind of a quote. It's the start of a blog post, and please visit Franziska's Substract. So this is, I think, for a German academic, this is a very unusual text, because there seems to be a taboo in Germany to be critical of the liberal Russian opposition, something that is called the liberal Russian opposition, and actually talk about Russian responsibility, because the whole kind of German discourse has been shaped around we need to save good Russians, or we need to save Russian society, we need to help. So my question first, as a German academic, actually asking questions about responsibility, but also coming from the German society that had to grapple with the idea of societal responsibility for the past. What kind of reactions did you receive to this from the general public, but also in academia, and what challenges do you face in German academia, if there are any challenges, in actually talking about exactly these questions about complicity and responsibility?
Thank you very much. So I think I'm going to talk about two different issues. First, the kind of public sphere, and then the academic sphere. And first of all, in the academic sphere, no, let me start otherwise, with the kind of public sphere, which is of course connected. we still do have a very strong fixation and idealization of what is often called the Russian opposition. I prefer the term anti-Putin camp for, I think, in this room, obvious reasons. And there are several problems connected to this. Number one, and I think the fundamental one, is that these issues are these people, and I'm like talking now about those figures who are well connected in the West, very present in the public sphere, so Navalnaya, Kara-Murza, also Ilya Yashin to some extent. So these kind of people who have, and I think it's actually also an important point, no political influence in Russia whatsoever. So their kind of symbolic power is based on this being present in the Western media and having access to leading politicians, business people, intellectuals, and so on in the West more general. And I think the most fundamental problem is that it is not recognized. These things I outlined in this post. And the reasons for this, I think, there are several reasons. Number one, and there you kind of have a parallel, I think, to academia. Many journalists in Germany and the West were fascinated by Navalny. And they kind of wrote these very hopeful pieces about him and that he kind of embodied the other Russia, and that he was at least able to bring people to the streets and so on. And if now somebody comes along and keeps saying he's not what you think, or what you made him, he's not what you made him. Yeah, and it actually never made a secret about it. It's all out there in the open, and there are several reasons why this figure does not represent a beacon of democracy, liberty, and a different kind of Russia, because he never addressed the fundamental issues. So it's always about money, corruption. That's the stuff he was interested in. Never distanced himself from his racist remarks. Ran an anti-migrant campaign when he was running for Moscow mayor. So there's a long list, and I think in this room I probably don't have to name everything. And so you would have to admit mistakes in your own professional career, quite simply. So I think this is one of the reasons, and just to share one experience with this, before I published this, and actually starting the Substack was one of the reasons was my frustration with German media, because I actually wrote a longer piece about the so-called Russian opposition, which was called anti-Putin does not mean anti-imperial, and all the German newspapers refused it. Actually, one of the major newspapers, one of the editors wrote to me, I actually really liked your piece, but the person in our newspaper who's like the Russia expert, she didn't want it. And then a couple of months later, her review of Navalny's memoirs appeared, and I understand why she didn't want my piece. And then in the end, it was published in a Swiss online platform for this reason. So I think that's just fundamentally admitting your own mistakes. Number two, because we have this kind of fascination with Russia and this idea that there must be a good Russia somewhere, these people are made into a symbol that it still must exist somewhere. So it's actually kind of a strategy to not face the ugly truth and to not see. But I think that is so important why we do face this truth, because only then can we understand the just enormity of the challenge. And the third point is that in this adulation of the so-called Russian opposition, you can still in Germany see that the traditional hierarchy towards Eastern Europe, in which Russia occupies the kind of top, is still at place. And I just give you one very concrete example, because I got into a fight with a journalist I actually like about this. The weekly Die Zeit had Russians on their title page, like pictures of them on their front page, 3 times in 2024. Navalny, Navalnaya, and Kara-Murza. Each time accompanied by 2, well, Navalny was dead, obviously, but the 2 interviews with Navalny and Kara-Murza were very uncritical. It was just about this hero suffering, this kind of stuff. And I can't remember whether it was no Ukrainian or once Zelensky. But it was just still this kind of to pay more attention and see them also more as individuals. Individual people is still kind of reserved for the Russians, or more reserved for the Russians. Finally, I think that this hierarchy can also be seen, for example, when Maxim Wyciszkiewicz was freed from Russian captivity. One German newspaper reported on this, and imagine the media frenzy if Navalny had been freed. Yeah, I mean, every newspaper would have been all over it. So I think that's the third thing. And then in the academic sphere, I think the fundamental problem is really that we don't have this discourse. We don't really talk. I mean, I have like email fights with colleagues, but like going out in the open and kind of reckoning with Russian society, I really don't see that many Russia experts from the academic field doing it. And it would be important. But I think the same thing goes. I mean, especially those who have focused on Russia, they have also invested personally so much in Russia that that is like the crucial question. Supporting Ukraine, saying no, this war is not because of NATO expansion. All that is. There are still enough academics, German academics, who don't even do that. But doing that is easier, in a way, than really reckoning with Russia, because you're reckoning with your own biography, basically.
Thank you, Franziska. I think we will come back to kind of ways of, in this kind of quite situation where there is one society doesn't want to see another society. What do we do? I mean, what are the ways actually to solve this? We will come to this. But Ernest, if you can provide us with a Polish perspective, maybe I don't like this idea of Polish perspective because when people say like Central Asian perspectives, I say like there is no such thing as Central Asian perspective. There is simply your perspective. But if you can speak about your perspective on Polish society and how what you think about what are kind of reactions in Poland to this idea, because I had a feeling that Poland was also very kind of hopeful about kind of the Russian opposition and the liberal, and it's also part of the maturing of Polish society, saying that let's build bridges. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, this is kind of this what kind of the impression I've got, and what are the discussions about what are the discussions in Poland regarding this issue, if there is a difference. And also another question to you as a scholar and simply a thinker, do you think it is worthwhile, I mean, now 3 years after the full-scale kind of acceleration of the war, how we had very little reactions, you know, there is still big resistance among kind of Russian intellectuals or Russian opposition figures towards the concept of, you know, questioning one's imperial legacy or colonial legacy. So is it worthwhile to actually speak about this topic? I mean, should we put our energy into other things, speaking more about our own societies, or maybe some bringing more knowledge about Caucasus and Central Asia to Poland, for example, or concentrate on, of course, Ukraine is there, but maybe other less well-known regions like national republics in the Russian Federation, or to put energy into other things, because is it worthwhile to still actually discuss this issue? I mean, what is our role? Of not being Russian citizens and not carrying this responsibility, still speak about it, and maybe historically kind of the perspective, of course, in Polish history there was also this history of exile intellectuals who became very important for Polish nation state building. and taking this kind of historical perspective, sometimes in exile or outside, it feels hopeless. But what is our role as not being kind of Russian citizens, but in discussing this issue? Is it still worthwhile or not? So these are two questions.
A lot of questions. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's an honor and privilege for the center to be a partner of this event. It's going to be my own perspective, not Polish perspective, obviously. But I will try to draw some observations about Polish attitude. I will start with this, that definitely your article would easily appear in Polish media. And that's the difference between our two countries, and I think I don't have to elaborate on that. It would be welcome. Because it would be sort of bringing wood to the forest. So things that are obvious in Poland are not that obvious in Germany. I mean, but we know that. It's actually you ended up with the Polish immigration. The patron of my institution, Juliusz Mieroszewski, is a very well example. This is a Polish immigrant that was based in London, and it was one of the first quite brave people, intellectuals in Polish immigration after the Second World War, that openly said, we cannot go back to 39, we cannot go back to Polish mid-war borders, we have to accept independent states between us and Russian Empire. We have to do whatever we can to establish proper relations with those countries, because only together we can push back Moscow. And for now, it seems obvious, but at that time, in the 60s and 70s, it was a revolution in Polish thinking, because most of the people in London wanted to get back to the past they remembered from the 30s. And actually, his ideas were translated into Polish foreign policy after regaining independence. So it tells me about the role of the emigration and opposition. It has to go against certain things. So if I hear Nawalnaya and Kara-Murza, both of them I do respect very much. But if I hear them saying about beautiful Russia of the future, the dream of beautiful Russia of the future, what I truly expect from them is to kill the ugly nightmare of Russia of today, and how they are going to do this. It's not about projection of their dreams. I'm not interested in Russian dreams. I mean, come on. As a Pole, bordering Russia, and probably Ukrainians in the whole are experiencing this physically on daily basis. As a Pole, I'm interested in certain Russia that will not be a threat to my own country, my own kids in years to come. And this is a very practical issue for me. It's not about even Karl Jaspers and his ideas of responsibility. I think Russian society is responsible. The question is whether it feels responsible. No, it doesn't feel responsible at all. The opposition should make them feel responsible, and not to treat them like innocent kids being hostages to the hostile regime. It's not like that anymore. Maybe it's 10–15% of people thinking like that, and they don't fulfill the obligation. They don't fulfill their duty, actually, to try to shape the Russian society. Let's imagine what is happening in Russian schools right now, the level of indoctrination. Year after year, we have another generation being developed in Russia that is totally anti-Western, that is extremely hostile to Ukraine, that dehumanizes actually Ukrainians. And the question for the opposition should be whether, if you imagine that somehow the regime is gone overnight, and Kara-Murza, Navalny, and others are taking power, so whether they should reflect the moods of the society, which is imperialistic in its core today, or rather they should try to invent a policy to shape it in a way to transform the country into the normal country. I was asking questions, for instance, do you write history textbooks of the future Russia? Do you have anything? If they are gone, what are you going to propose to the kids in Russian schools? Or are you going to wait for 5–10 years to develop new programs? Because if you don't have anything, then you will just replicate the system. You will not change anything. So my message to them is always very practical. I'm not interested in you. I would like you to feel responsible for what's happening. And I know a few Russians that actually feel responsible, and they're very open about it, and they are very often ostracized in social media by the opposition. Not being invited to Berlin, where there is now the center of Russian liberal opposition. So I would like them to offer me not the vision, projection of beautiful Russia, but actually concrete measures how they're going to change their imperial mindset, how they're going to influence their society, what proposals do they have. And this is what I think in Poland is driven by our hundreds of years of experience of the neighborhood and the Russian policy. Is it naive for now to think about it? Yes, I think it's not highly unlikely, but if they want to be true actors in this game, they should take this responsibility to move forward. Otherwise, I see them, as Franziska wrote in this post, which I read, is actually very self-centered people focused on grants from Brussels, Berlin, and other places, just to live through coming years peacefully here in the West, and that's it. But this is not the opposition that I am interested in from the Polish perspective. I want them to change Russia and to offer me their own tools and instruments how they are going to do this. So as to not replicate Putin system in years to come.
Thank you. Valerii, you work a lot with leaders of national republics in the Russian Federation, non-Russian republics in the Russian Federation. And when we talk about Russian opposition, very often we forget that there is a kind of exile government in Chechnya, Ichkerian government, there is Tatarstan, there is Bashkortostan, and usually the Russian opposition is kind of Moscow circles, and you know, representatives of other republics are very often excluded from these debates about responsibility, about imagining the future of Russia, and our relationship to the future. So can you tell us if there are, because you have this experience, first of all, what you've if you can reflect on debates in Ukraine regarding this issue, but also reflect on the debates that you held with representatives of non-Russian republics, but how do they see what is Russian for them? Because this is the problem when we talk about Russian opposition. For me, of course, one should talk to, for example, to Zakayev. It doesn't have to be Navalny, or it doesn't have to be. So there are really representatives, opposition figures who are non-ethnic Russians. So how do we? What do they say? What is their perspective, and what is your perspective on that whole issue?
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I have 8 points. Probably I will speak not so long. Just to depict, to provide, to offer you the whole picture of what is being held. First, let's consider Russian society vertically, using the very technical, not academic approach of 80-20. So there is 80% of population which don't care. So they either believe propaganda or just surviving, or believing to everything, and they have no critical thinking, and their mind could be changed overnight. Then 80 of 20. So there's 80 of so-called, Russians call this deep people, deep nation. Then take 15%. 15% is the intellectual elite. Engineers, professors, whatever, programmers, managers. They understand everything. So what they do, they push the war out of their conscience. They simply live in their life as nothing is happening. Many of them indeed left the country. And then there is last 5%, top elites, political elite. all of them are beneficiaries of this war. In the beginning, in 2022, not all of them were beneficiaries, but Putin's regime made all of them beneficiaries to strengthen its position and to make all of them responsible personally for some blood. So 80, 15, and 5. This is a vertical structure. Then, if we should take a look at horizontal structure, territorial structure, and national structure, we will see absolutely different picture. We will see Moscow and St. Petersburg, which have no war in their life. War is on TV, something very far. No one of their neighbors is drawn to the army or is conscribed and so on. There are no posters, there are no burial ceremonies, there are no killed in actions. They live their usual normal life. And Putin's regime makes whatever possible to keep Moscow and St. Petersburg out of the war. And then we shall go to the regions, especially to the national republics. We should see that their presence of the war in their life is extreme. So they are absolutely unproportionally mobilized to Russian army and absolutely unproportionally killed in action. 3 leaders are Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, and Buryatia. Indeed, I have so many figures, I am sure that I should tell them, but just readiness to fight. Support the war, 56%, but in Moscow, more than 60, in regions, 40. Then readiness to fight, vice versa. Moscow support the war, but isn't ready to fight. Other regions don't support the war, but are ready to fight. Why? Because of their poor economic situation. For them, for many of them, Russian army is the only social lift and the only job which is affordable. And then even this unproportional mobilization even is emphasized by a special resolution of Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And then there is one very small and unproportionally highlighted group of people which are so-called Russian liberal opposition. So there is not, this is not thousands of people, not tens of thousands, not hundreds, several dozens, simply several dozens. And Western media pay them 99% of their attention, just to several dozen people. This is absolutely unproportional. This liberal, as I said yesterday, this Russian liberal opposition is like Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire was not holy, was not Roman, it was not empire. And this liberal Russian opposition is not Russian because they all are from Moscow. Moscow is not Russia. Moscow is not a typical point of Russia. From the theory of systems, if you would like to understand a system, you should take some typical points and then understand how it works. You cannot take just one point, and you cannot take the point with an absolute exception according to all criteria. Moscow is absolute exception in all criteria from Russian system. So you cannot take Moscow and understand Russia. So this is not Russian, this is not liberal, because liberal is about human rights. And human rights are described in United Nations documents, and the right for self-determination defined by the Declaration of 1960 is one of the basic human rights. No, they don't recognize this. So they are not liberals. And indeed, they are not opposition. But why the West highlights only them 99%? Because of 2 issues. One very idealistic and one very pragmatic. One very idealistic is their colonial mind. So they consider, as Francesca already said, that the Russians are more important than Chechens, Buryats, and Bashkirs. And one very pragmatic. Because if we believe, or at least if we show our belief that this Russian opposition is important, that means that coming back to business as usual is possible. Because we believe that this opposition will come to power one day, and then again Russia will be a member of International Commonwealth of Nations, and we will come back to business as usual, especially German business and French business would like to do this. And this is a very pragmatic way why they support Russian opposition. Because for them, this is a sign that it is not necessary to push Russia, to press Russia, to sanction Russia, to embargo Russia, just to support these several dozens of people. And everything will be fine. And exceptions are rare. Indeed, they are. Take some Russian people who are in jail now. But indeed, being in jail, as Roza examples confirms, doesn't guarantee that a person is not an imperial hero himself or herself. Lenin and his group and Stalin also were also in imperial jail before becoming rulers of the empire. So this being in jail alone doesn't provide change of mind, as we can see. But there are some people who really are. So that's a very good point that this is anti-Putin camp, which Franziska already has said. But who is, to be anti-Putin isn't enough to be anti-imperial. And that is why not only the very traditional for Ukrainians question, Crimea belongs to whom is important, but also I would like to ask Kazan, Ufa, Makhachkala, and Grozny belongs to whom? This is the point. And indeed, even there are some people in exile which are changing. I'm using present continuous here, which are changing their mind, like Kasparov, for instance. He is in transition. We will see the final point of this transition. And then about democracy. Very few people believe that Russia could be democratic without deep internal transformation. I could, again, I'm not sure that everybody of you were yesterday. I would like to again cite famous Russian philosopher Nikolai Berdyaev, who said that from February to October 1917, all possible ideologies, parties and ideologies marched through in front of the eye of the Russian glaze, and what Russian man chose what he had, the Tsar and the empire. Imagine, to be a democracy, it is necessary to have democrats and democratic institutions, like courts, like election commissions, like free media, like NGOs. Nothing is present. Imagine that a rose unicorn from Venus conquered Russia with the only one idea to have free and fair elections in Russia. Which party will win these elections? Chauvinists, fascist chauvinists, because this is the most popular ideology. That is why decolonization is the only key to democracy in Russia, as stated by European Parliament declaration, resolution, and many resolutions of Parliament Assembly of Council of Europe and other international organizations. This is not necessary dissolution of Russia, because re-federalization is only the way. Making Russia federation back. If you will read first clause of Russian constitution, it consists two clauses which cancel each other. First clause, Russia is a federation. Second clause, Russian Federation and Russia are equivalent notions. Sorry, Chechnya is not Russia. It's Russian Federation, but not Russia. Bashkortostan is Russian Federation, not Russia. Sakha, Buryatia as well. And what we see now, we see a kind of appropriation of these decolonial discussions by Russian liberal opposition, which is not Russian, not liberal opposition. This appropriation looks like a round table about decolonization without any one representative of colonized nations. This is like, imagine a round table on female rights, where all people around the table are old men. Could you imagine? This is appropriation. And then finishing, I would like to say that many people in Ukraine doesn't support this discourse about good Russians and bad Russians, because the right understanding could be provided only by the glance from the future. So let's consider to be good or to be bad are moral estimations which are sometimes subjective, even personal. But if we would see to look at the Russian future, look at the Russia from the point of view of the future, which kind of scenarios of development of Russia could be. So we should consider that we have very good metrics, not a moral metric, bad or good, but a metric from the point of view, does they make sustainable peace in Europe closer? From this point of view, there are no good Russians and bad Russians, but there are positive Russians, negative Russians, and not important Russians. Positive Russians are those who make sustainable peace in Europe closer. Some of them are in exile, some of them are in the underground, some of them are in moral escape inside the country. Some of them are in jail. Then there are negative, those who make sustainable peace more far from us, those who fight in armed forces of Russia, those who provide Western societies, Western elites with some myth about possibility of democracy in Russia without deep transformation of power, without new federal treatment agreement, for instance, and so on. And indeed Russian propaganda and all those who work in Russian military industry. And the majority of Russians is not important. They do nothing with the sustainable peace. They don't make it closer or more far. And the last point is that what is being held in Russia is a sign of the great problem of humankind, which we can call fear of the future. First signs were 20 years ago when Russian intellectuals stopped to discuss future at all. For the first time in the history of human literature, the very important genre, which is science fiction, switched from the future to the past. What is science fiction? It's about star exploration, it's about different planets and galaxies and so on, right? So this is about the future. So hundreds of books, of romans, and thousands of short novels in Russia about in science fiction genre, they switched into the past. So they are not about the future, they are about the past. This is the fear of future. And if there is no picture of the future, the only thing which you have is picture of the past. The picture of former military victories, some myths which are not correct historically, academically, but could be used by propaganda and so on and so on. And this problem of fear of the future is much wider than simply Russia, because Make America Great Again, or I'm sorry, Make Hungary Great Again in the borders of before Trianon is the same. That is why I recommend you a fantastic novel of Bulgarian writer Georgi Gospodinov, which is Time Shelter. This is the warning of the humankind what apocalypse we are now approaching. The great fear of the future. The result of that was what we have in aggressive Russia and its wars in Ukraine, Georgia, whatever. And I'm sorry to say, in our models, attack to Poland is very probable, sorry. So, but the fear of future is not only in Russia, it's in many, many other parts of the world. So that is why we can say, I'm finishing with the formula, you know this formula, the beautiful Russia of the future, which already had been mentioned. Our formula is the most beautiful thing in beautiful future, in beautiful Russia of the future is that in the future there is no beautiful Russia at all. Thank you.
I'd just like to pick up on a few points you both made about the different perception in Poland and Germany. I actually gave an interview once to Gazeta Wyborcza on this issue, and no German newspaper ever asked me, which is already, I think, a sign. And the comments were so funny, and many comments, and my two favorite ones was, yeah, she's right, but is she sure she's German? And the other one was, yeah, she's right, but why is she telling us? Shouldn't she be telling these things to Germans? So that's like very clear, these different kind of perceptions of these people in Germany and Poland. And I think part of it also, apart from the things I've mentioned, is that Germany has its own colonial history. And this idea that Germany and Russia over centuries basically shared German-Russian colonialism at the expense of East and Central Europe is still very alien, even to very educated Germans. It's just not addressed on a societal level. And also this is anecdotal evidence, I haven't actually done any research on this, but very often the defense, when I criticize these figures wherever on social media, so you're asking about reactions, is, oh, but we also took so long to accept responsibility. So it's this kind of identification more with Russia, because Germany has more, as a kind of imperial aggressive nation itself in history, there is still this tendency among some to identify more with Russia than with Ukraine, because we recognize our own history more in the Russian history than in Germany. So, well, we were given a second chance. We took so long to reckon with the past. Don't be so harsh with these people, which, like, from an analytical perspective, makes no sense. I'm just trying to analyze what I'm seeing. And I was also now reconsidering what you thought about the academic discourse in Germany, and I think actually it's even worse than not being addressed. I once went through the issues of Osteuropa, which is one of the main German-speaking journals, kind of between academic and public sphere. And the pieces on Navalny are all actually also quite glorifying, concentrating very much on how his fight against bureaucracy and so on. And I think it's not only because we need to understand the magnitude of the threat and to see that even those who see themselves as like the alternative to Putin have this colonial mindset. Only if we understand that, we can understand the enormity of the threat. So just from an analytical perspective, it's important, but it also has political consequences. But it's also important because I didn't really answer your question about reactions to the Karamurza piece. If you do that, you get attacked by Russians. So if you go further than, as a Western academic, if you go further than saying stand with Ukraine, support Ukraine, if you do the next bit, criticizing Russia, you're attacked. And sometimes I think this is a place where I can say this, I wish my German professor colleagues would have this experience of getting attacked, because then they would understand. Oh, I have only good experiences with Russian colleagues. Yeah, well, I wonder why.
Thank you. I have in the next row of questions to all of you on the basis of what you said. And still, like, under this big question of should we still think about kind of Russian society responsibility, or should we simply switch our attention to other things? Because 3 years have passed and not much has changed, so maybe we should stop expecting the colonizer to get rid of their own privileges, because at the end of the day, if you look at colonial studies, you look at the colonial condition, at the top is what is called colonial privilege, and so the hierarchy goes down to the proximity of death. So we have all these studies where people say, like, if you're at the bottom, you're more likely to die very early because you drink bad water, you work 3 shifts, you know. So the colonized is kind of is more has more proximity to death, or you're bombed, you know, like, and of course the colonizer has these privileges because they're rather colonized, so it's on the cost. And so maybe it's very naive from our side that, and resistance is always risk-taking, you know, and maybe we are naive to expect from the kind of colonial societies to take risks, because it will be deprivileging, and who would deprivilege him or herself? So of course there will be a different resistance, which is resistance to decolonization, right? So it's structurally and historically, it's maybe we're addressing something that is a hopeless issue, or maybe not. So my question, Franziska, to you, do you have an experience, because you're an academic, but you're also a public figure, so you give a lot of speeches, and you're very present in German society. Were you able ever to convince somebody from Russia to actually, as Teresa beautifully said yesterday, it's not enough to be not racist, you have to be actively anti-racist to create spaces where the marginalized people would get their voice. So it's not enough simply not to be colonial, you have to be actively anti-colonial to be able to give spaces to Chechens, you know, to Bashkirs, to Tatars, or even to Ukrainians, or even to Polish scholars, you know, like not to dominate this kind of the field of East European history, for example. So do you have do you have successful examples of how you spoke to somebody who did not see this issue and then actively became anti-colonial? What are your life hacks? What are the arguments did you use? Yes, so this is the first one. The second is to Valerii. You said that the Russian society doesn't have is afraid of the future, that's why it's so past-oriented and not future-oriented. But isn't it a great chance, isn't it a great opportunity for Chechens, for Bashkirs, for Tatars to present their imagination of the future and to say, well, we have a project for the future of Russia. We are not afraid of the future, we're actually looking forward. Isn't it something that gives an opportunity? Because at the beginning of the war, I kind of developed for myself kind of an analytical distinction between the concept of population and society. And I say population is a silent group of people. Society is a speaking and reflective and arguing a group of people. So if the transition from population to society is actually kind of this self-critical, is exactly these dialogues, is exactly the ability to look self-critically at oneself. So if we have Russian population, isn't it a chance for non-Russian republics to create societies where they can actually be leading this conversation about the future? And if you have any examples of that. And Ernest, you gave very good examples of, you know, how do you understand that people are serious about changing Russia? I mean, to look at the products, like what are exactly real projects are they doing? Are they rewriting history books? What other kind of ideas do you have that and also, like, because you're leading the Mieroszewski Center and taking this example of Mieroszewski himself and the exile, what are the practical steps that one can take to actually do imagine alternative futures? But maybe, and it's connected to Valerii's point, maybe it's possible not to work with kind of Moscow opposition, which is a much more, but also with all those invisible nations that they're visible for themselves and they're visible for many of us, but they're invisible, of course, in many other contexts, supporting their exile governments and investing kind of our attention into speaking to them. So yes, if I don't know what is the order, Ms. Franziska, do you want to say?
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether I actually ever decolonized a Russian person or scholar. If I did, they didn't tell me. But I have had interesting conversations with people who really then did, like from Russians, who then really thought about what I said. But I have I think probably they were already at a certain stage. So I think there has to be a certain amount of readiness to address these questions. I'll give you a concrete example. I was talking to a Russian journalist. Well, no, actually, he gave a talk in Western Europe about the Russians basically robbing Ukrainian art. So I mean, already, if you're a Russian journalist working on that, it's already. There is a certain amount of reflection you have to pass to say this is my topic. But then he was talking about the new museum for Zhdanov, which has been erected in Mariupol, and he said in his talk, this is what Zhdanov said about the great Russian poet Anna Akhmatova. And then I said from the audience, well, why? I don't think anybody in Ukraine cares what he says about the quote-unquote great Russian poet Anna Akhmatova. Why didn't you write about what Zhdanov meant for Ukrainian artists? And then I met him in the cafeteria a couple of hours later, and he was talking to a Polish colleague, and they were talking about this. And then he asked me, did it annoy you? And I said, well, a little. I said, yeah, I only named her because she's famous. And I said, well, why is she famous? Why is she more famous than Ukrainian poets of the same age? And that kind of got him thinking. And I think he will actually, but then again, you need this kind of readiness to do it. And he was serious about it. He said, can you give me literature on that? Do you know any? Because he's not a historian, he's a journalist. And I forgot, as I usually do, and he wrote me emails, send me this text. And then he read it, told me about it. So I think if you can engage, but there has to be a certain amount of readiness. Otherwise, I think you're a bit of a lost cause, and it's also a waste of your time and energy, basically. What I have, I think, managed, but again, this is anecdotal evidence, is to change the mind of just German audience. And also, again, anecdotal, I sometimes have this impression that people who did not actually really deal with Russia or didn't think about Russia or Ukraine until 2022 are much more ready to kind of rethink their stereotypes. Because they haven't invested anything in Russia, and so sometimes I have these conversations with regular Germans who come, well, not regular German, we're all regular, but who haven't dealt academically with Eastern Europe, and they sum up Russia in 5 or 6 sentences, better than some of our colleagues, because they've just been listening to Ukrainians. And I think that's also part of the problem we're facing, because if you've invested so much and you lived through the 1990s, maybe were in St. Petersburg or Moscow, had Russian friends, had these dreams about a democratic future of Russia, it's harder to accept that you were wrong, especially for experts. But we don't like being wrong. Yeah, I was also wrong about things. A lot of things. I'm sitting. Is that an expression in English? I'm standing on your shoulders. I learned so much also from Botakoz and other colleagues after 2022. And that last point, sorry, networks are important. If you publicly come out as a Western academic, you build networks. Because people reach out to you, either from Ukraine, also Russians, who also agree with you, and you get to know these people. So it's a way of connecting, of identifying like-minded people, is to talk about this issue.
So the question was, do these nations, we call them hidden nations, and some people in the West call them unexpected nations, because who can expect that they will arise? Nobody knew about that. Do these nations have an opportunity to present their national views? The answer is very clear, no. Because the very idea to introduce some new peoples in the so-called, sorry to say, Russian studies, what is very is considered as a very negatively in Western academic circles. By the way, Why Hidden Nations? It was a book by Adrian Karotnitsky and his colleagues, written in 1990, called Hidden Nations, where Hidden Nations, this expression Hidden Nations was used to depict all those nations which arise on the territory of Soviet Union, which was considered as a Russia. It was just a big Russia. Who are those Estonians, Ukrainians, Georgians, Armenians, and Kazakhs, if all this territory is Russia? So it was absolutely unexpected that time, and Karotnitsky called his book Hidden Nations. Now the same story, but the hidden nations are no more Ukrainians. By the way, Western attitude to Ukrainians in many cases is based on the fact that Ukrainians unexpectedly appeared in the middle of Europe. That is why those Russian myths about Ukrainian nation invented by Austrian General Staff or something like CIA, or maybe Lenin and CIA together, are so popular, because this is unexpected. And now it is unexpected again that Russia is not Russia, that this is Russian Federation. And even according to Russian statistics, which, as we know, you know, the Israelis say that there is a lie, big lie in statistics. But even Russian statistics acknowledge that between two censuses, number of non-Russians grew from 22 to 28%. In reality, speaking with Russian demographs, we can imagine that the real number is more than 40%. Sorry, this is absolutely different social reality. And this population is growing. Ethnic Russians are going down. So very, very soon it would be 50-50. Sorry, it is absolutely different social reality. And Putin indeed knows this social reality. And for him, this is one of the reasons why of invasion to Ukraine, and one of the reasons of mass kidnapping. You know, this mass kidnapping is considered by international law as a genocide, and not for the aggression, not for mass murder, but for this mass kidnapping, the International Criminal Court issued his case. So coming back to Hidden Nations, what we all have to do in Ukraine, in Germany, in Poland, in many countries of Europe and the United States and so on, we should create spaces. So thank you very much for this point. We have to create spaces for them, for their expression of their political views, for expression of their culture, for expression of their history, for expression of their fact of existence, for expression of their cuisine, why not? And what we in Ukraine are trying to do to encourage them to create spaces in Ukraine, to encourage Europeans to create spaces in Europe, and to encourage those nations to use these spaces, because they have something like learned helplessness. So it is necessary to encourage them to fill these spaces with their life and their views. And then there is one thing which helps them. The thing which always is a problem, but now it is an advantage. The traditional nature of these societies. Even those societies which are already have been urbanized, like Tatars or Bashkirs, they continue to maintain their traditional societal structures, and this helps to oppose automization, which we can see in big cities like where ethnic Russians live, in big cities like Moscow and small cities like Belgorod, and so on. One of the purpose of my presence here is to encourage all of you to help to these hidden nations to create spaces and to have opportunity to present their visions, their cultures, and their future. And just finishing, I would like to say, highlight very important point. We are speaking about nations with strong feeling of identity because of their specific language and specific religion. Sometimes it is Islam, sometimes Buddhism, sometimes their own national beliefs like in Sakha or Erza and so on. But there are also Russian-speaking regions which consider themselves not Russians. Take Siberia, take Northern Caucasus, so-called Kazakh territories, maybe Ural, and so on. What is the difference between Siberia and Australia? Both countries are distant from their capitals, imperial capitals. Both countries are inhabited by descendants of former criminals and adventurers with not so big number of indigenous people. Both are very rich and both feel those own identity much stronger than their common identity with imperial or former imperial capital. So why Australia is free and Siberia not? And indeed, during census, it was absolutely prohibited to Siberians to call themselves Siberians.
Thank you, Valerii.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would simply comment on the kind of the traditionality, because I think there's a lot of kind of colonized nations have been claimed and interpreted as traditional, and I think for example, if one thinks that someone is traditional, but if we look at the history of Chechen wars, all the women also took on the arms, you know, and went to fight, you know. So it's what is traditional, and you know, like if you look from like my perspective would be, wow, it's quite untraditional, you know. And I know so many female kind of powerful Chechen women that we don't know what we put in this, and I think, but the kind of the plea to listen to these people, to know that they are there, and actually to listen to them and learn from them. Is actually will maybe also like allow us to find better words, you know, better words to describe, to speak, and actually to resist the colonial language that sometimes we also use. I do that sometimes too. So yes, thank you. It's just like my intervention. And Ernest, if you give us some.
I will start with a quote, actually, with one of the founders of one of the significant countries in the world, and you probably know the guy. He said, or wrote, a little rebellion now and then is a good thing in political world, as storms are in the physical. He wanted to say that with resistance to the state, resistance to the government actually is a healthy sign of the free society. It was Thomas Jefferson, actually, soon after, actually, United States were created. And as a leader of a country, he was aware of the fact that even as a leader, as the founder government, actually, he needs ferment within the society. But there is also other quotation, maybe not that politically correct, but I think quite true when it comes to Russia. So the tree of liberty must be refreshed from the time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And this sounds as it sounds, but Russia needs catastrophe. I cannot describe it in details, but they need to be aware of the fact that they need catastrophe, they need catharsis to transform themselves. And the opposition's I'm getting to what you ask. The opposition's role, whatever it is, liberal, Russian, I'm not going into definitions. Actually, those people who would like to transform truly Russia, they need to get with the message to their own society. Sorry guys, but we committed so horrible crimes, atrocities. We were unable to face our past. We have a fear about the future. We are just living here and now, doing all those nasty things all the time. if we want to do something seriously important with our country, then we need to face the collapse of the whole world. And what I mean by that is that this is politically very dangerous message, and I remember very well Navalny in Warsaw 5 years ago when he was speaking at one of the meetings and was asked by Ukrainians and Belarusians quite difficult questions about Crimea and other things and his statements. And at that time he was playing against Russian politicians, so he was unable to say anything that would go against the general public mood in Russia. And after the meeting, public meeting, I heard him saying, well, no, I want to be in power in this country. I'm a politician. I'm not an activist anymore. I'm a politician, so I need to face the society as it is. So maybe up to 2022, well, there were those illusions might be true, but now it's gone. You have to go the other way around, and I'm afraid that Karamurza, Navalny, and others are just going in line with what Navalny was trying to do, and it's not going to work. And it leads me to the conclusion: we shouldn't invest that much into talking about Russia, which we are doing right now, for instance, and also in practical terms. When they apply for grants, should be up to us, I mean Europeans in the EU, to shape the agenda, and not just we provide money for some of them, and they organize themselves just in their own bubble of those people, without people from the national minorities in Russia, just putting them aside, and they don't just. All the others, all who want to go against the general thinking, are put aside, and this should be up to us to include those people. And the history, I'll repeat it. History matters in this sense that if they don't develop and they have no idea about it, they have to face the past truly in order to build the future, and not just the distant past. But they also have to do it, but also the current past of yesterday's attack on Odessa. No, I mean, this is the past already. You have to face, you have to reckon with it. And otherwise, if you don't do that, then my own response would be just, let's ignore them all the way around. And just put them aside, build a wall, and that's it. And invest in those who are around and try to defend our walls and just... maybe in a century from now something else happens. It's of course quite risky response for those who are in Russia, would like to develop their own identity, yes, but I think that there's no other way around. That Russia needs to face the collapse of the system, not of the country as such, but of the system. I'll build the wall, actually. Sorry, that's my poor English. That we should just defend our border with Russia, and that's it. I mean, and ignore them at all. And that.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, this is.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. Look into the future. Don't use cliches of the past. Yes.
Okay, so we can have now time for comments and questions, and I see a lot of hands, and I need somebody to help to carry the microphone.
Hi. So a very important topic, especially I think that in Ukraine we tend sometimes to, just not want to speak about Russia, and so it's important for us also to speak about Russian society in wartime. But I have to say that I found quite little things about the Russian society actually in what was said from an empirically based perspective, and I was wondering maybe for this kind of panel it would have been interesting in the future to invite, for example, the sociologists from the public sociology lab from Russia, who can intervene online, who did ethnographic research in Russia, in spite of the dangers, in spite of, all the risks that are implied with doing ethnographical research in Russia at the moment. Also people like Ilya Budraitskis or Ilya Matveyev. So we have actually a lot of Russian scholars who can talk about their society at war at the moment and, you know, bring us like really interesting perspective on this topic.
Thank you. We were supposed to have a Chechen activist who experienced the invasion of Chechnya, and we wanted to have Chechen perspective and Crimean Tatar perspective. Also, I've been invited to Levada Center to discuss exactly your statistics, and when I asked who were the people who were interviewed for your statistics of the Russian opposition and the Russian society, and I asked how many Chechens, Dagestans, Bashkirs, Tatars, and I talked to the leadership of Levada Center, and they said they are not important. We mostly asked for Moscow and Petersburg and the Russian core center. So because I've been involved in evaluating these results myself, we actually wanted to bring in more voices, and for technical reasons, we don't have the Chechen and Crimean Tatar perspective who had first-hand experience. So yes, but thank you for your comment. Do we have more comments? Yes?
Yes, thank you. My name is Ekaterina Pyslari. I am a part of Beda Collective, who is already for 3 years working closely with indigenous initiatives from colonized nations of Russia, and I want to really have interference, like small kind of addition to what was said, because it's really like I can see the paternalizing kind of attitude towards like a lot of indigenous initiatives that also with the phrase about the learned helplessness in every single nation, in every single national republic in Russia, in every single colonized locality, there is a strong decolonial movement who is doing a political work, who is doing political activism. Currently, like in Altai, there is like huge protests against Kremlin and against the cutting the self-governance that was previously preserved in some way or another in Altai. There was Baimak protests in Bashkortostan in 2023 that are directly linked to the Bashkortostan Bashkortostan decolonial movements, and it was about Fail Elsinov. And there is a huge work that is actually happening in Germany right now, and because of the indigenous activism and because of the indigenous advocacy, OSCE actually adopted resolution in Vancouver that actually recognized Russia as a colonial empire. It was not a consolidated effort of any Russian liberal opposition. It was an effort of indigenous people who are working on a political level. And I think it's our problem that we don't see. They're not hidden. They're working very hard. And it's an infrastructural problem. And it's a problem of people who are not willing to change the perspective, and it's not necessarily a case of giving space, but giving space as a way to promote a way out of learned helplessness. There is no learned helplessness. There's a lot of agency, and also there is a lot of political persecution. Because especially now, Baimak case in Bashkortostan is still ongoing. People are still being arrested, and a lot of this advocacy is currently in exile. A lot of this advocacy is going on in Berlin. A lot of this advocacy is going on in Basel. And all of those people are willing to get back and are willing to have an indigenous activism on the ground inside Russia. So it's very paternalizing to say, and the only thing that I heard here is just how this there is this structural imbalance between Russian opposition, Russian Moscow opposition, and some vague hidden nations. They're not vague, they're not hidden, they're very vocal, but because of the structural because like how academia is structured, how like the also the grant giving institutions and like all this I'm sorry, like yes, how the imperial infrastructures are like yes.
Yes, thank you
Yes.
very much. This is a great comment.
Yes.
But Valerii, I'm sorry, we have several. We just have a few minutes, and I would like to collect. But I think there will be a little bit maybe more attacks, so we just. It was yes. It wasn't well. We can interpret it differently, but it was a strong disagreement. Yes, but let us collect all of the disagreements or comments. I think it's very important. This is what we are here for, basically.
Yeah. I'll try to be very brief. Thank you very much for this panel. I'm Sergei Lubimov, European Humanities University in Vilnius. My question is about, I had this impression that all the panelists basically looked at Russian opposition from perspective of their values and kind of we register what kind of values they have and then we finish this analysis kind of and make conclusions. I just wonder whether we need to take further steps, like in terms of analysis, even in terms of kind of empirical registers that we examine, for instance. I'm thinking, as a sociologist, I'm thinking about networks and biographies, first of all. Like to provoke, like, is it meaningful, for example, that Mikhail Khodorkovsky was a close associate with Vladislav Surkov, who was very much behind curating this Lugansk, Donetsk People's Republics, and then also part of this intelligence structure before the full-scale invasion. And or I don't know, how should we look at higher school of economics in Moscow, which like top managers. It's known that it's also curated by security services, or then, I don't know, if to talk about networks, all these kind of intellectuals connected to Echo of Moscow Radio, which is a Gazprom media holding part. So like in terms of research and empirical kind of registers, is it enough to look just at values, or it's not enough? Rhetorical question, and hope it brings some doubts to this general mood.
Yes. Thank you. It's another question on how kind of imperial studies, so how empire works. So there are more hands, right? More comments? No? Because I saw so many hands raised. Any other comments? Okay, all right. So, Valerii.
Thank you. In late 1980s, I was a part of Ukrainian move. And what I am seeing now in national republics and regions with strong local identity is very, very similar to what we had in Ukraine, in my humble opinion, in late 1980s and beginning of 90s. There was active minority which pushed the idea of independence and self-determination, and there was passive majority which simply survives. And when I'm telling about helplessness, this is not only the feature of different nations, this is the whole population. So I know personally almost all leaders of national liberation movements of nations of Russian Federation. I work closely for several years with them, practically on an everyday basis. I know a lot, and we have some specific methodology of sociological research on the ground. So I absolutely agree with the position that there are strong national leaders, strong and vocal national movements, but at the same time there is a majority, and majority is voiceless and helplessness. Like it was Ukrainians, my country, my nation, 30 and plus years ago, and like many, many others maybe in other parts of Soviet Union. Maybe my position was could be considered as a paternalistic, but in this audience, I wanted to emphasize our responsibility. Because if they say that they are strong national movements and there is everything fine and so on, this means that we have no our responsibility to help them. I wanted in my speech to emphasize our responsibility to help them, our responsibility to create spaces for them. And this is, from that point of view, when I say that I would like to encourage all of you to help to create spaces. This means that we are responsible to help them get their independence, their freedom. And not only simply, as many Western observers are considering Russian-Ukrainian war, we support Ukraine, we believe in Ukraine, and we do nothing to help Ukraine. No, everybody in this world is responsible to create space for those who are colonized and voiceless. Yeah. And I would like to emphasize and highlight this, our responsibility, here in this audience. And just one point about hidden nations and so on. I spoke to the audience of people, all of them were American and Canadian national security and defense experts and policymakers and so on. And I spoke to the full audience of these people, telling them about national security of America, that national security of America in the 21st century will be ensured not by Greenland, as President Trump said, but by Sakha Republic. And I asked them, who of you know about Sakha people and Sakha Republic? No one. This is exactly what they call hidden nations. No one. If we would do research in Western societies, do they really know about those colonized nations? We shall see that only minority of scholars know something. And this is our responsibility to bring this knowledge and to bring this awareness to the societies. And I would like to emphasize our responsibility here to do this. That is why I call them hidden nations, because they are vocal, they have strong minority of activists and national liberation movements, but it is our responsibility to help them to raise their voices and to speak up. And this is exactly what I would like to emphasize here. Thank you.
I would add that I think my colleagues in East European studies or Russian specialists, they would not know where Kalmykia is, most of it, or would not be able to locate Buryatia or say anything about Buryatia. And these are the specialists in the field. But yes, Franziska, you want to say something?
Yes, because it's just so. It builds up on what you were saying. I mean, I can only agree with the point you raised about that we need more sociological research on the anti-Putin camp. I was invited here, I think, not so much because, I mean, I don't do research on the Russian anti-Putin camp. I'm just here. I think I was invited because of my experience and kind of challenging stereotypes about them. But I would like to add for the critical comment made from our perspective as Bota and me, historians of Eastern Europe in the West and the German-speaking world. I think there's, I mean, I absolutely agree that the whole way the grants and networks are structures, privileges, these Moscow, St. Petersburg intellectuals over the non-Russian colonized people within the Russian Federation, and that's a huge problem. It's a huge problem that they're just not integrated into these academic networks the way they should be. But also adding to this, to make it even worse, so to speak, from the way in the last, I would say, 20, 30 years, we had this whole field of new imperial history in our field, where many Western scholars in particular were like fascinated by the assumed ability of the Russian Empire to integrate, to manage diversity. And I've been rereading some of these articles, and it's just amazing how they just do not mention that Russian language and culture was always privileged, and that the political power was in St. Petersburg. They're just going on about diversity all the time. And I think so, to kind of really reckon with this, I think we also kind of need a very critical examination of how we write the history of the Russian Empire. I'm now Soviet Union also, but I'm now speaking of the empire because that's the field I did my first book on. And because to some extent you see how this idea of Russia as a successful empire translates into the present. So Tatarstan is still, and I know Tatarstan a little because I did my first book on Bulgar Muslims. Tatarstan is still cited as this wonderful example of how to integrate Muslim people by Western scholars who don't know Tatar, of course. Yeah, who base this whole idea on their reading on the 19th and 18th century and project their ideas onto the present and on present-day Tatarstan without actually knowing the language for a start.
May I just a few words? Yes, it was about the values because I took as a point of reference the beautiful Russia of the future, which is a projection of their supposed values, but with a caveat that in order to treat them seriously, it has to be supplemented with something real, not just a vision. And you mentioned these networks, and I, honestly, I doubt that Russia would transform in years and decades to come because of this, actually, because the deep state that Putin managed to create, the structural dependencies, the patron-client relations, would create, after he's gone, would create a situation when the new people, but that will obviously will fight for power, would try to co-opt all those who are in the West right now, those or the others, into the system to make us believe that it changes a little bit, and all the rest stays the same. I think it's good. It would be a good thing for academic community, for instance, to do a good analysis of using the new techniques of, let's say, the text mining, to take Russian intellectuals or public figures, academics, since 2000 up to this day, take all their articles, papers, scientific and not just scientific, Facebook posts, to do an in-depth analysis of their transformation. Whether it was real or fake, I don't know, but just based on the text and to understand how this intellectual life of Russia actually developed, because it would tell us a lot about potential the future direction. And the last point, I think the indigenous people are trapped in the sense that if I see it as a Pole, my first feeling is that we need to do whatever we can to stop Russian imperialism. And if I see Russian empire, obviously indigenous people are somehow gone, because I see a general threat from the system, as Ukraine sees, because it's about existence, so I don't care about the nuances. So the problem is, the puzzle for all of us in the West is how to invest into those people, actually to create such a situation within Russia that would increase costs for the system to survive. And this is the question for you. I'm not a specialist. I don't know. I don't know if how much, what shall we do from practical perspective, because I understand there is that in academic domain, we see Russia-centric world still, even if we are 3 years after the invasion. But I think in academic realm, it's easier to, let's say, move the money here and there and to invest into these research directions. I'm not saying it's easy, probably it's easier than the political world, because just the last point, if you see, and please do not laugh, if you see Donald Trump posts that 60 million Russians died in the Second World War, and billions of people see it, and we laugh as intellectuals, but it matters, because it says that it's all the nuances that are related to the empire, its intricacies of its development, the people within it are lost. And how to get with the message to actually those who are in the West are responsible for decision making, this is a challenge.
Thank you. Thank you for staying here, for coming here. I will just, if it's okay, thank you very much. I mean, that's a very difficult topic. It always creates a lot of tension, but this is, we need to talk about difficult things. And just to close it, I have a son who is 23 years old, who is half German, and he told me recently that he met Russian young people who came from Russia during the full-scale invasion to Germany, and he was talking to them and asked them, so what do you do against Russian imperialism? Are you organizing? And I was very surprised that my son would ask young Russian men about their responsibility, and I asked him, so why did you ask them? Because I was very surprised. And he said, Mama, you know, like he did his exchange here in Canada, he went to France for language courses, he spent time in different countries, you know, he's a well-traveled son. And he told me, Mama, you know, anywhere I go, and I say that I'm from Germany, people ask me, so tell me about your Nazi grandparents. Anywhere I go, I grew up with that, and he was at international school since he was 5 years old, and he's like, Mama, even in kindergarten, people ask French, Americans, Canadians, British, everyone from Western the world, it would be the first question, and I grew up with this question, so what did your Nazi grandparents did? And he was like, because I lived with that, and I had to face the German part of my history. Not everyone was a Nazi, but he said I was confronted with that, and I expect also my, if I am at a party with Russian boys, I expect them also, and I never knew about it. I just found out this year that my son had this reality. I didn't know about it, and then I thought, oh, that's the West for me. That's the West, is asking for responsibility. It's the British, it's the Americans, and it's the French, mostly, who asked my son, what did your and this is kind of part of taking responsibility and making it a personal thing. And this is what I think is the Western, this is how population becomes society, is that everyone is aware of responsibility. But this is simply my anecdotal thing. It was a big revelation. I didn't know that, about that. But thank you very much. This is a very good food for thought. Unfortunately, we didn't have our Chechen and Crimean Tatar participants who were supposed to be giving us a perspective.
Recording in progress.
We don't want to support colonial knowledge production where these voices are excluded from these conversations. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.